Just because it's comedogenic does not necessarily mean it's going to lead to acne.
Today, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the differences between comedogenicity and what was the other one? I don't even know yet.
Comedogenic versus acnegenic.
Yeah, we're going to cover that. Sadie's going to tell me what that even means.
I am going to do that today.
We're just going to discuss a little bit more about our opinions on this as formulation chemists and why we, although we might be biased, think formulas are pretty important.
So let's start off with the term non-comedogenic, because a lot of companies are using this term, and
dare we say it? How are they using it, Sadie?
Dare I say they're getting a little loosey-goosey.
Keep your geese in line.
Seriously.
Welcome back to another week.
Guys, it's been so long since we last chatted.
It has been, and I'm so excited to dive right back into these pores.
Me too, but before we get started, I'm Sadie.
And I'm Natalie.
And we're cosmetic chemists, and we're here to give science a hot new makeover.
On this podcast called Beauty by the Baker.
Which, while we have you, please like, subscribe, share with a friend.
Yeah,
comment.
As you may have heard, we're running out of space to record episodes. And in order to keep this podcast going, we need to make a little cash.
Once the hard drive runs out of space, we have to stop recording.
We have to be done.
There are going to be people out there who are like, thank God.
Like, how many terabytes do we have left? It's dire.
We should do a countdown on our Instagram page.
Well, we're down to the last 50 gigs probably. So, uh-oh. Guys, send your support quick. We need a new hard drive. Well, I am so excited to be back for another week.
Me too.
Excited to hear more about our non-comedogenic stuff.
Yes. So last week we talked about where the term non-comedogenic came from. We went over a little study that was kind of crazy and discussed sort of our thoughts on the whole non-comedogenic thing. Mm-hmm. If you haven't listened to part 1, go listen to that, because this part might not make that much sense.
Yeah.
But if you've already listened, we're here in part 2. The way I said that, crazy, disjointed.
If you haven't listened to part 1, you might want to listen to that so that you know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Where the whole idea of comedogenicity even comes from.
Mm-hmm.
We covered all of that last week. So if you haven't yet, go check that episode out. But today we're going to continue that discussion. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the differences between comedogenicity and what was the other one? I don't even know yet. Acnegenicity.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Comedogenic versus acnegenic.
Yeah, we're going to cover that. Sadie's going to tell me what that even means.
I am going to do that today.
And we're just going to discuss a little bit more about our opinions on this as formulation chemists and why we, although we might be biased, think formulas are pretty important.
Well said.
Thank you.
If you didn't go listen to last week's episode, basically non-comedogenic is just the idea of something that does not clog your pores and lead to acne. A lot of companies make claims about how their products are non-comedogenic and how they don't use any non-comedogenic ingredients.
They don't use any comedogenic ingredients.
They don't use any comedogenic ingredients. Thank you. They're like, all of our formulas are comedogenic.
All of them.
Every single
We won't
ingredient.
use one single ingredient that's not going to clog your pores. These things are going to suck right in there.
You are going to have acne up the wazoo.
Consider your pores plugged.
Literally. Good luck getting that out. So let's start off with the regulations behind the term non-comedogenic. Because a lot of companies are using this term, and
dare we say it? How are they using it, Sadie?
Dare I say they're getting a little loosey-goosey. I need a shirt. I need a merch shirt that says loosey-goosey. Yeah. Maybe it's your yard goose and we name her Lucy.
That's so good.
Oh my gosh.
That is
Lawn
Lucy
Goose. Oh my god, she's our newbie expert.
We'll insert a picture of Lucy Goosey.
Yeah. That's so good.
We should bring her in.
We'll put her right here.
Yeah.
She doesn't belong in the lawn. She belongs in the salon.
Yeah. Our salon goose. Lucy Goosey.
We'll put her in a shower.
All right.
Oh my God. Okay, Lucy's coming for the next episode.
Yeah. Consider it done.
Yeah, seriously. That was incredible. You guys just got to witness our idea making process.
Yeah, this is how the magic happens.
It is.
This is BXB behind the scenes.
BX behind the scenes. BXBTS.
Ooh.
Okay, oh my God. Now it's time to talk about regulatory.
Seriously.
I'm getting crazy. So in the United States, the FDA, which is the regulatory body over cosmetics, that's the Food and Drug Administration, and the FTC don't require any pre-market sign-off for cosmetics. So if you just have a cosmetic product, you don't have to go through the FDA in order to put it on the shelves unless it's a drug or an OTC, in which case those have different requirements. That's all we're talking about. The FDA, however, does require that all labels must be truthful and not misleading, and anything that crosses into disease treatment turns the product into a drug. That would be something that uses the words like cures. That would have to be regulated as a drug. So we have talked about drugs and cosmetics ad nauseum on this podcast. So it doesn't even matter. But
if you want to hear more about the whole drug versus cosmetic conversation, go listen to some of our other episodes. We'll link one specifically right here.
Yeah.
That we talked in depth about it. But it's a conversation. It comes up a lot because it's common. It's common. It's ground that must be tread lightly in cosmetics.
Yes. So in December of 2022, there was an act that passed. It was called MOCRA, and it widened the FDA's access to safety files, which basically just says that, like, if a company is making claims at any time, the FDA could go to them and say, you need to provide us evidence of these claims. And a company has to have evidence to back up everything that they're saying.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy that just was passed because, like, we already know that, like, the FDA doesn't require pre-market approval for these things. I am surprised that it's just recently that they essentially require post-market approval, honestly.
Yeah. They're like, actually, you do have to have evidence, and we can ask for that at any time.
Yeah.
You couldn't do that before?
Guess not.
That's crazy.
I guess not. But, I mean, great. I'm glad that that's now written in stone.
Same. Yeah. So it doesn't cross over into requiring non-comedogenic testing, but brands are required to keep records that they feel substantiate safety. But MOCRA doesn't mention anything about comedone counts or rabbit ear assays. Obviously.
Right.
So in the EU requires adequate and verifiable evidence for every performance claim. The law doesn't define the study size, site, or cutoff that makes a product non-comedogenic, but authorities can ask for whatever safety data you have, and the companies can get in really big legal trouble if they don't actually have testing done that's required.
Yeah, so that's fair.
Yeah, which I think is great. Like, it's a brand, if they're making claims about something, they should be able to say where they got that information from.
Yeah.
Instead of just being all loosey-goosey about it.
Yeah.
So
keep your geese in line.
Seriously. Basically, there aren't any actual legal rules or definitions for non-comedogenic testing. So this means that companies oftentimes will just formulate to the standards of online acne checking software and then use the marketing term non-comedogenic because there isn't any sort of legal or regulatory definition for it.
Right. And although we say, like, this is great that these companies are being held accountable, the accountability is sometimes not as strong as we would like it to be.
Yeah. And also, the FDA is probably not going to go after companies that are using the term non-comedogenic on their packaging. Like, they have bigger fish to fry. So, in theory, they could come after companies for making claims, but
people are injecting themselves with salmon sperm.
Literally.
So.
And peptides now. There are bigger issues. The FDA can only do so much. They're probably not going after small companies that are saying their products are non-comedogenic and being like, but do you have the data for that?
Yeah.
It's just not happening.
Right.
But the reason that this is frustrating is because a lot of consumers will look for the term non-comedogenic on product labels, and putting non-comedogenic is pretty low risk, high reward for companies.
Right.
It's a great marketing tool that probably isn't going to get them in any trouble.
Right. It's like the sulfate free, paraben free.
Exactly. Like they can just kind of say it and it's easy. However, I will say that FDA does crack down on claims occasionally.
Yeah.
This is sort of a tangent, but in 2023, they cracked down on a 2 times faster healing claim on hydrocolloid bandages from Johnson & Johnson. Nothing has happened yet in that case, but they do investigate these claims from time to time. So
But they did raise some alarms.
They did. So if you're a brand, it is definitely in your best interest to formulate correctly.
Right.
And, you know.
Yeah. That is... It seems the theme that we see with a lot of brands, efficacy with their products and marketing. There's this delicate balance of formulating good products, making money, marketing in a way that makes you stand out, avoiding the FDA.
Exactly. The 4 horsemen of product development.
Of the cosmetic apocalypse.
Exactly. Non-comedogenic is kind of just another example of why these buzzwords work so well on consumers, because they're a shortcut to safety in a world where most people are pretty hyper vigilant about the ingredients that they're using. I think we're in a time where people are really looking at and dissecting product labels, and companies know this and they exploit this. So we've talked about the idea of clean beauty and non-comedogenic. These are examples of marketing terms that don't need to be tested in a lab, so any company can really put it on their label. And then boom, they have a bar that the marketing team is really easy to clear.
Well, yeah. I mean, if something doesn't exist, it's pretty... If there's a standard that is not defined, it's much easier to say that you've hit that standard.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
like, yeah, my product's clean.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean anything to me, but it's
clean.
It's non-comedogenic. It doesn't have 100% petrolatum, so it doesn't clog your pores.
It's not comedogenic, right?
Exactly. Well, I'm going to formulate products that are 100% comedogenic, so I can't relate to these companies.
And you're right.
Exactly.
As long as you can make people afraid that their pores are... You need to convince people that their pores need to be clogged.
Yeah.
Fear unclogged pores.
They're scary. It's scary to
What's coming out of those pores?
You don't even want to know the things I've seen. So when products are tested for comedogenicity, there's quite a range of testing. In a well-done lab study, they would apply the product to 30 to 50 people and then use a randomized double-blind protocol. But
30 to 50's, I mean, it's still pretty low.
It is still pretty... Well,
but
apparently in another study I found, 10 subjects is considered large when it comes to evaluating comedogenicity in skincare.
Well, yeah.
So,
I mean...
the bar is low.
The bar is low for all cosmetic studies.
Yes.
30 to 50 is the population of China for cosmetic studies. You know, like that is...
that's the goal.
Yeah, that's the maximum number you could possibly get.
Yeah.
Is like one college classroom full.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
Usually I think I see 30. For some reason, I feel like I see 32.
Yeah.
Very often.
But like, I know Netflix did one show that was just 100 people, you know, testing things on 100 people. So like Netflix can get out.
What show?
I think it was called like, I don't remember what it was called, but.
I think brands just don't want to put money into testing.
No.
Because they have to pay all of the volunteers.
Exactly. And most people aren't actually looking into what happened. As long as you can say, we did a test and people saw results, people aren't going to be looking into how many people did you test. So it's not advantageous for a brand to spend money on doing that when we're the only people that care.
Literally, I was just going to say, no.
Literally.
People are probably fast forwarding through this section of the episode. Like, I actually could not care less if it's 2 people or 200.
If it's 2 or 3.
2 or 3, it doesn't matter to me.
Anyway, 30 to 50 is arguably better than 2 to 3. So we'll give them that. And for cosmetics, it is unfortunately a great number.
Yeah, that gives us really, really good data, apparently. Usually in a well-done study, they would apply it to the face or upper back where the skin's more likely to break out. And then it would ideally last 3 to 4 weeks. And then also rely on applying it how you would apply it in real life. So there are some studies that will like apply it to the skin for 48 hours underneath a bandage. It's like, well,
like a patch test.
Yeah, like that's not what I'm doing.
No, I don't.
Face.
No.
So I don't know if that's what you're doing.
No, I did put hairspray on my face today, but
Oh, well,
Lock it all
hairspray
in.
was found to be non-comedogenic.
I
in
know. I actually
1975. Did you read that?
I took note of that last
Yeah.
week.
So anyway, I kind of decided that I'm sort of bored talking about studies.
So then everyone else probably is too. Let's move
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so basically, if you are someone who like really wants to dive into the studies and you care about it, some red flags to look for is not using a control, using less than 20 volunteers for the study, lasting less than 2 weeks, or only using one person. Like that's not a very good sample size.
Mm-mm.
And then also another last thing that's important to note is that sometimes companies don't even do their own studies. They'll only use the rabbit ear results or those online acne checkers. So if a company doesn't have any studies to back up the non-comedogenic claim on their product, the claim is purely marketing.
Yeah. And using an acne checker as your proof that something's non-comedogenic is enough.
Yeah.
As far as that particular claim goes, the FDA is fine with that being like your evidence. So
listen to last week's episode and decide if that is enough for you.
yeah.
If comedogenicity is something that is important to you, because I think if you're acne prone, I definitely think there is validity, I guess, to looking for products that are non-comedogenic, because there are certain products that are more likely to break people that are acne prone out than others.
For sure. And again, that's way more to do with the formula and
Exactly.
like breathability of formula and how that formula reacts with your microbiome, which once again, 50 years ago when this rabbit ear study was done, the microbiome was not a topic of conversation.
No, they didn't care.
And
Who
that's
knows if it even existed 50 years ago.
we had not developed bacteria on our skin
We
yet.
have evolved since. Yeah. So if non-comedogenicity is something that's important to you, you need to look for actual studies, not just the claim on the packaging saying it's non-comedogenic, because that doesn't mean anything.
No, you can throw that on just about anything.
Okay, another thing that you might see on product labels is the term non-acnegenic. So what is the difference between non-comedogenic and non-acnegenic? You might be asking yourself.
I'm definitely asking. I already asked.
Yes, you did. You were ahead of the curve. So there is a difference between products that are non-comedogenic and non-acnegenic. Non-comedogenic refers to a product that's been formulated or tested so it won't clog pores or form blackheads and whiteheads. And non-comedogenic studies, if they're done well, they count new comedones after 3 to 4 weeks. Non-acnegenic means that the product won't cause comedones or the inflammatory lesions that follow comedones. So I didn't really go into all of this, but there are kind of different stages of acne. So there's like the early formation where it'll kind of clog your pores a little bit, and then it can move into like cystic acne, depending on the severity of it. So basically, non-acnegenic addresses the entire acne process, whereas non-comedogenic refers to the initial plugging of the pore. So just because it's comedogenic does not necessarily mean it's going to lead to acne.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes.
The comedogenic test, they were testing the rabbit ear skin. Talked about that more last week, but that was specifically used because it showed an accelerated version of like the initial clogging.
Yeah.
But like we have mentioned, with formulation is important, application is important. In some of these tests, they were applying things and leaving them for like 48 hours and stuff. I'm sure that's where this acnegenic comes in a little bit more.
Yeah.
It's clogged, but does that actually lead to anything?
Exactly.
Or is it being removed and
yes,
swept away?
Exactly. Because non-acnegenic studies are usually more robust than non-comedogenic studies because a product can pass a pore clog test, but still inflame your follicles enough that they would fail a full-on acne test.
Yeah.
So non-acnegenic is just a more robust version of testing, assuming that the testing was done well,
Right.
that they did a good study.
That's always a big assumption.
Yeah. Yes, that's true. But I don't see the term non-acnegenic as much as I see non-comedogenic.
Definitely not as big of a buzzword.
Yes.
Probably
so,
because it requires a little bit more FDA proof than non-comedogenic would.
Yes.
That would be my guess.
Yeah, especially because acne is regulated by the FDA.
Yeah.
I don't actually know if the term non-acnegenic is also
Regulated.
FDA regulated. I should look into that.
Yeah. I don't know either off the top of my head, but
yeah. Anyway, but that's the difference. So if you see those two different things, non-acnegenic is generally more robust than non-comedogenic.
if it's not regulated by the FDA, I'm sure it's a term that's going to be making the rounds in marketing at some point.
For sure. Yeah, seriously.
If we're not seeing it now, we'll be seeing it eventually.
Yeah.
Once people are privy to non-comedogenic not being a big deal.
Once this episode comes out,
Yeah.
things are going to change.
Once we spill the tea on comedogenicity,
The people are going to know. Okay, let's chat about acne checking software and how it works and how accurate it actually is. There are a bunch of different websites or different types of software online. They're typically called pore clogging ingredient checkers, and they allow you to either scan a barcode of a product or copy and paste an ingredient list into the website.
Yeah.
And the theory behind it is that the software will scan the list and then tell you if there are any comedogenic ingredients in the product. Most of the softwares use James Fulton's 1989 study and or the original rabbit ear study as their reference for the comedogenic ingredients. So they're basing the software off of ingredients that we put on rabbit ears, which we've
50 years ago.
50 years ago, which we've already discussed. Maybe there's some accuracy issues with that.
Maybe.
I don't know. I'm not a scientist. These can be helpful if you're really prone to breaking out, but they almost always overflag ingredients because there's zero context to any of these tools. Like every single app or website has a different metric for what they think ingredients clog pores. Like you can put the same product into 10 different websites and they're going to flag different things. There's no consistency between them, which can be really confusing. Some companies might consider anything above 1 to be comedogenic, which we talked about last week, but there's basically a scale from 0 to 3 where 0 doesn't clog pores at all and 3 like strongly clogs pores. So a company could say anything above 1 is comedogenic. Another company could say anything above 3 is comedogenic. Like they all just have different metrics.
Yeah.
And they can also provide false positives. Rabbit skin is way more sensitive than human skin. So ratings that are 2 to 3 on rabbits could be completely harmless to humans. It just is not a very accurate way of flagging ingredients.
No.
And lastly, these checkers don't consider the concentration of something. Something at 5% and 0.05% in the same formula would still be flagged the same.
Yeah.
But they probably would not have the same effect on your face.
No.
At those different concentrations.
Probably not.
So they're generally inaccurate. You really need to take them with a grain of salt. I do not like using them. I don't think they are a good frame of reference. And I think there are a lot of other ways that you can avoid breakouts with products.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like an ingredient checker, even though AI is getting better at understanding like trends in formulations or in ingredients, there is still just a lot of that is based on the information that's out there, which when we start to look into what that's even based on, it's not usually super hard hitting science to begin with.
Yep.
But even then, AI is not to a point where it can scan a formula, a product barcode, and determine comedogenicity based on the ingredients and the formula as a whole, because it doesn't know the formula as a whole. And the concentrations of those ingredients are going to have a huge effect on the finished formula. You could have the exact same ingredients in 2 different emulsions and have one behave more like a water and have the other emulsion behave more like oil. But they could have like the exact same things in them. Technically. There's just not any way based on a list of ingredients in the formula to be able to tell what that formula is going to do on your skin. Especially if we're just comparing it to results of the rabbit ear study from 50 years ago.
Exactly. It's just not accurate.
No. The ingredient checkers are not extremely helpful, but I do feel still that like, even though there are biases in reviews and companies incentivize positive reviews, I still think that can be a really good source of information on specific formulas, because usually you can find people who share their experience and like it could have a million great reviews and then you'll see one that's like, this made my skin way worse.
Yeah.
And you can use that type of information as well when deciding on products to use.
Exactly.
That can also play into the marketing of products.
Yeah.
So
For sure. So speaking of which, Dr. Michelle Wong of Lab Muffin Beauty, love her. She wrote a great article that kind of summed up a lot of what we said and also gave some really good advice for how you can use comedogenicity scales correctly. So if you're having a really bad breakout, but you aren't sure which product is causing it, you can use the scale to rule out ingredients if they're ranked really high, like a 4 to 5. It might not be the root cause, but it could give you a place to start. Like you can eliminate maybe the highest possible contributing factor.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like those numbers still came from some sort of observation.
Yep.
And like if a certain petrolatum at 100% does cause some clogged pores, then a lotion with petrolatum probably has a higher chance than
a lotion without.
Yeah. I mean, at least enough that in your trial and error, it could be worth considering.
Exactly. Especially if you're breakout prone. I think that's the biggest differentiator is if you aren't someone who really struggles with acne or is prone to breakouts, you probably don't need to worry about this comedogenicity scale as much as someone who is more prone to it.
Right.
But even then, because the final formula matters so much, it just gives you a starting point. It's just a place to maybe you can eliminate that and see if that helps, but it's not a guarantee that it will.
Right.
You can also avoid applying concentrated ingredients to your face like oils and butters if they're highly comedogenic. Ingredients are more likely to be comedogenic at higher concentrations. So if you're using an ingredient like coconut oil, which has a rating of 4 directly on your face, and you're prone to acne, you might want to proceed with caution or avoid it altogether.
Yeah.
You might be totally fine. You might have an issue. It just depends on your skin.
Yeah. I did mention, I think last week, that I wanted to try using coconut oil to remove my makeup. But I also think it's important to mention that if I do try doing this, I plan on following it up with a cleanser, which would negate probably all of the comedogenicity that I would have experienced from coconut oil, because I'm guessing that this rating of 4 has much more to do with if I were to put coconut oil on top of my makeup and then go to bed.
Exactly.
Which is not how I'm going to be using it.
Yeah.
So, still going to try it.
Yeah. No, you still should. It's been a whole week since you said you'd try it last.
I know.
I can't believe you haven't tried it.
Well, I haven't taken off my makeup yet.
You're like, I don't know why I'm breaking out.
I have no idea. I can't tell.
She also says in her article, don't worry too much if a comedogenic ingredient is lower than the first 5 or so ingredients, because it's probably not in the formula enough to have a huge impact. The most important thing I think any of us could ever say about comedogenicity is to always patch test your products before you apply it to your face. Generally, what I would recommend is putting a little bit on your arm first. If there's no irritation, you can put a little bit on your face. I like to do it on like the right below my ear, kind of, because I could cover it with my hair if it caused any problems. I'll apply it there for a couple days, and then if I don't have any issues, I'll apply it to my whole face.
Yeah.
That can help you avoid large breakouts, and it can also kind of help you narrow down which products might be comedogenic to you. Because again, your personal skin and the formulation are what actually are going to determine comedogenicity together.
And if you do a spot test like that, you can rule out other environmental factors a little bit more. Because acne can be caused by so many other things, like just disrupting the natural process of your skin. So even just like getting a little extra sun could make you break out.
Yeah.
You know? And so doing a little patch test in an inconspicuous area can help you kind of rule out other things like hormonal acne or incorrectly applied makeup or something like that. That's just the factors that come into play when being alive.
Exactly. So yeah, basically the term non-comedogenic used for marketing is only as good as the unpublished data behind it. So your safest bet is to patch test the products, pay attention to how your skin behaves, and then also remember that the concentration and the formula matter way more than any single ingredient rating ever could.
Yeah, thank you so much for covering all of that.
Of course. It really was so fun. I like dove into the article, and it was interesting to kind of see how it was done and see how it's been misinterpreted over the years.
Yeah. I mean, we remind you guys a lot about the shortcomings of mankind, but just to remind you again,
in case you needed one.
in case you needed to remember it again.
These trying times.
We are still in the process of learning a lot about how this stuff works. Science as a whole still has a really long way to come. And we've talked about the reason why that's a slow moving process, but there are still so many things that we are learning about things like the microbiome and why acne exists. And even if certain ingredients do accelerate acne or make it worse, these are all things that we are still trying to figure out. It's still going to take a long time.
Yeah.
But hopefully we can continue as scientists to make advancements in that and start to figure out a little bit more of the specific reasons why acne is happening.
Yep.
But for now, unfortunately, it's still just a lot of trial and error and a lot of using our best guess.
Which is essentially the theme of every single episode we've ever done.
Yeah. But don't ever trust people that think they know all the answers, because
yes,
those are your red flags.
Yeah. True. It's important to be able to say, yeah, we have a decent idea, but this definitely needs to be improved upon, and there's a lot we could learn.
Yep.
Don't ever stop learning, guys.
Don't do it. And let's not stop learning now. Why don't you keep learning about this topic over on our website, where you can find our blog post and sources for today's episode. And you can do that at beautyxspeaker.com.
You can also follow us on our social media pages pretty much everywhere at beautyxspeaker. You can also find our personal Instagram pages. I'm Sadie BXB.
And I am Nat BXB.
And we would be so happy if you liked, subscribed, and commented your favorite part of this episode.
Yeah.
And if you can help us raise money.
Yeah. We are 0% of the way to our goal to a no hard drive. So if you want the episodes to keep flowing, then please share this episode with a friend.
Share it.
Get our viewership up so that we can start making some ad money, you know?
I feel like a grifter.
Hey, this is panhandling in 2026.
Yes.
And luckily, you don't have to hand me cash. You just have to hand somebody else the link to this episode.
Exactly. Hand us your hand in the form of a like.
Yes. And if you're not already, please subscribe. It actually does help so much. And
It really does.
subscribers is kind of what we need in order to start making money. So
We are 1/10 of the way there.
yeah. So even make some new accounts, subscribe. I don't care. I don't care how it works. We just need
Go
1,000 of you to do
house
it.
and log on to her computer and subscribe to our channel.
Literally. It doesn't matter. We are asking you, begging you, please just help us get there. And then once we get there, you won't have to help us as much. We promise.
We won't spend 10 minutes at the beginning and end of every episode asking for you to give us money.
Anyway, I'm getting a phone call.
And I need to go to the bathroom. Okay, bye.
Bye.